When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Miracle. User: M4Ollie. Posted October 12, 1999.
I didn't believe in miracles until I became one. It might sound like exaggeration, but I am, in fact, a walking, talking miracle, a marvel to modern science. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and given roughly 8 months to live. Considering I went in with a persistent cough, calling this a surprise would be a major understatement. Now, I'm the picture of health, but even miracles don't come free. Initially, I couldn't even understand what the doctor had just said. I laughed, which wasn't the right response at all, but it was completely spontaneous. Then I babbled for a little bit. Obviously, he'd made a mistake, mixed up the tests, all the usual denial stuff you'd expect. The red vinyl of the cheap chairs in the consultation room was sticking to my arms. That wasn't something that happened to people with cancer, right? It was so stuffy in that room too, like the walls were amplifying the summer heat outside. People with cancer don't complain about the weather. I was grasping at straws while the doctor looked at me with an infuriatingly understanding look on his face. The days that followed are a blur. My friends said as many encouraging things as they could, but my very presence now made him uncomfortable. We're all dying all the time, but we find ways to tune out the ticking of the clock. When someone close to us has their due date bumped up, it's hard not to hear our own time counting down and want to put some distance between ourselves and that feeling. All that is to say, I don't blame them for how they acted. It's not the kind of thing you can really control. It still hurt, though. Knowing more or less when you're going to die really focuses your mind. You start realizing how many things you never got around to doing, things you weren't even consciously aware of wanting. For example, I cried for an hour after accepting that I would never throw a pitch in a Major League Baseball game. Prior to my diagnosis, it always felt that no matter what I was doing, I could up and change it all at a moment's notice, go live in Germany or take up piano or eventually settle down and have some kids. Now, I had to face up to the fact that none of that was going to happen. In all ways, mine would be a life half lived. Since I wasn't going to be climbing Machu Picchu anytime soon, I decided it'd be funny to take up smoking. Admittedly, this wasn't my best idea, and the coughing fit I had in the parking lot of that 7-Eleven was embarrassing enough to kill me if the job wasn't already taken. This was the most frustrating thing about all of this. There were 2 separate masses in my lungs slowly squeezing the life out of me, but I had never smoked a cigarette before that day. Never even had to deal with much in the way of secondhand smoke. I drank like most people my age, but had never so much as smoked a joint, let alone gotten to the hard stuff. It wasn't even genetic. No one in my direct family had ever even had cancer, which is a kind of minor miracle in itself when I think about it. I kept thinking to myself, this has to be some kind of mistake. After the diagnosis, I stopped sleeping properly. Some of it was the cough, which really intensified in the wake of my meeting with the doctor, but more, it was the stress and anxiety of knowing what was coming. I can't tell you how many times I started to fall asleep before jerking myself awake, afraid that this was the last time I'd ever close my eyes. The fatigue sapped whatever energy the cancer hadn't, and days passed in a sort of fugue state. The first visit happened in my bedroom sometime in the late afternoon. I was having a little luck sleeping during the daytime, and so had decided to try sneaking in a nap before the evening anxiety kicked in. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed about being in the same room where I was sleeping, except it was lit with a blinding yellow light so bright I could feel it through my eyelids. When I tried to open my eyes, they felt heavy, and my vision, what little I could see, shimmered as if I was looking through water. Vaguely, I could make out the shape of 3 figures surrounding my bed. They spoke amongst themselves, but in a language I had never heard. At some point, the dream ended, and I woke up, my room empty and my heart racing. A moment later, I started coughing up blood onto my powder blue comforter. In the days after that dream, my sense of disassociation increased. I was an observer watching someone else's life, a life that was ending right in front of my eyes. Sleeplessness got so bad I started hallucinating, black flashes at the corner of my vision, balls of light that disappeared when I looked straight at them, looming figures in flowing robes. None of it lasted for long in the moment, but it was rare that I ever had a moment where I felt alone. After days and days of that fog, I finally collapsed from exhaustion and everything changed. At the time, I was alone and getting up from the sofa when my legs went to jelly and the carpet rushed up at me. My best guess is that I was asleep before I hit the floor, and the dream started a moment later. In it, I was lying face down, my head aching from where it had thumped into the carpet. I couldn't open my eyes, but even so, I knew the yellow light was all around me, filling everything, and I felt the presence of 3 strangers before hearing them whisper in their indecipherable language. There wasn't a single voice that could be separated from the others. Instead, they spoke as one, a rush of wind and dried grass as they observed my fallen body. This time, they touched me. Fleeting brushes across my bare back, as insubstantial as their speech, performed quickly but with purpose. If I had to describe it in literal terms, I would say they were drawing on me with feathers. The susurration of their voices intensified, 3 different intonations of the same nonsense sentence slowly drawing together like radio waves coming into phase to speak a language I could understand. An error was made. This burden is not yours. With that, their voices again separated into nonsense, whispering before fading out entirely. As the sound faded, my back erupted into searing pain as if my chest was full of boiling water, desperate to reach the surface. What felt like caustic sludge burned my ribs as it seemed to wend its way around them, prickling at my stomach and sliding across the top of my intestines. I tried to scream, but my body refused to move in any way, forcing me to endure the mind-breaking horror bursting through the skin of my back. I heard a sickly, wet chittering and felt a final, viscous tugging deep in my sternum. Finally, I could scream and didn't think I'd ever stop. When I came to, my sister Edie was shaking my shoulder. For a moment, I thought I was still in the dream and jolted at the touch, calming down only when I saw her flushed, frightened face. With her help, I pieced together that I had been asleep on the floor for almost 24 hours and had missed enough of her calls that she decided to come check on me. We talked for a while in that way of adult siblings who don't know each other as well as they should, and then she got ready to leave. As she did, she asked what kind of new meds the doctor had put me on. I shook my head and said that nothing had changed. She made a face, part confusion, part annoyance. Then she said she asked because I hadn't coughed once the entire time she was there. As the day wore on, I noticed that not only wasn't I coughing, but I was famished in a way I hadn't been in, well, a long time. I ordered and ate 2 large pepperoni and jalapeno pizzas, which should have put me into a coma, but instead I felt like I could run a 100-meter dash and put Linford Christie to shame. When night came around again, I slept like the dead. By now, you'll have guessed that the cancer was gone, and you'd be absolutely right. The doctor is calling it complete remission, as not only are the tumors gone, but the damage that already done has repaired itself. He's warned me not to get my hopes up too much, as this could be a temporary state of affairs, but I think that's more him trying to put this in a framework that makes sense to him. This isn't remission because I wasn't ever supposed to have cancer. I've always thought that miracles were meant to be wonderful things, but now I know it's not that simple. Getting sick because of a roll of the genetic dice is something I can understand. It's a bad deal, but it's honest and it comes from within you. Knowing that there's someone out there dealing from the bottom of the deck and that sometimes they get it wrong means your destiny isn't your own. I have a hard time with that. If the scans stay clear over the next 6 months, I'm going to leave town. Where I'm going is still up in the air, but I thought I might take in a ball game, then see what Germany's like. Life is a rigged game, sure, but I may as well keep playing.
Subject: The Blue House. User: Nat24. Published October 10th, 1995.
Can a house just appear? Up to this point in my life, such a question had never occurred to me, but on my drive to work this morning, I was listening to Casey's CD, lightly tapping my fingers along to one of Shostakovich's waltzes when I first saw the Blue House. There isn't anything unusual about the place, you understand. It's an offensive light blue color with a double-gabled roof and white gingerbread trim. It's cute as far as houses go, and it fits right in with the rest of the street, but I swear to God, it wasn't there before. What was there before? I asked myself that all day today at the office and was frankly shocked to realize I couldn't conjure a single memory. The house is the second in the south end of the block between the Stevensenses, who have lived there for generations, and the old Billings place, now home to a young paramedic who just moved to town last winter. Breckenridge is a small enough place that if you're paying even a little bit of attention, you can keep up on who's coming and going, but try as I might, I cannot remember that house ever existing, let alone who lived there. On my way home, I drove past the Blue House again, slowing down and giving it a long look through the passenger side window. On second glance, it wasn't quite as neatly appointed as it had looked this morning. The yard was overgrown with weeds and littered with dried leaves, while the small stoop was scattered with what looked like irregularly shaped stones. Every front-facing window was irregularly frosted with what looked like soap, behind which I could make out the ragged shape of haphazardly strung blankets in the long, slow process of falling down.
Thursday, October 11, 1995.
It feels crazy to write something like, "The house is still there," because if houses do anything, it's stay in one place, but here we are. I've driven past the blue house on my way to and from work the last couple days and still cannot take my eyes off it. The mystery of it all has deepened as well after asking a few of my co-workers at the bank if they know who lives there. Not a single one of them does. Watching them try to remember has been fascinating too, because they have total confidence in their ability to answer until it just won't come. Agatha, who's been there longer than any of us, practically flew into a rage on Wednesday, arguing that there wasn't anything between Stevenson's and the Billings house. This morning, I approached her again with a banal work-related question and worked the conversation around to how long she'd actually been living in Breckenridge. With no small amount of pride, she said her family had been in town since the beginning, helping to build the Heiser Hotel and other businesses around Tesoro Station, where Amico is now. Agatha has to be at least 60, so if she thinks the blue house can't exist, that means it's been somehow hidden for at least that long. Since I'm in the mortgage department, Carmen at the county recorder's office didn't think it was strange that I called asking about land title information for the blue house, though she sounded surprised to discover there was no corresponding documentation on the address. Carmen is a meticulous organizer, the kind of person an office basically runs around, so if she can't find the records, I'm willing to bet they're just not there. This just keeps getting more interesting. Tomorrow is Friday, and I think after work I'm gonna walk over to the blue house and take a look up close.
Sunday, October 15th, 1994.
The oddest thing happened. On Friday, I had fully intended to go take a closer look at the blue house, but never actually got there. When I pulled into the garage here just after 5:30, my plan was to shower, change into some casual clothes, then stroll over, and I did most of that, but instead of leaving the house, I must have fallen asleep on the couch. It's almost funny, I was so intent on going there that I dreamed about it instead. It was a vivid dream too. I so clearly remember the bang of my screen door as it swung shut behind me and the chill that Minnesota gets when winter is chasing at fall's heels. There were even cars on the street. I saw Ernie Wilson bombing around in that Mustang he spent all summer restoring, and Mrs. Riley walking her Pomeranian Alto. As I passed by the Stevensons' house, I could hear, through their open windows, the clatter of a table being set for dinner. Standing in front of the blue house was completely different from driving past it. It seemed to loom above me, its second story as far away as the setting sun. There was a smell, too, a sweetness I couldn't identify drifting on the air, which produced in me a strange mix of reverie and arousal. It was most certainly coming from the house, and I knew then that even if my interest hadn't been piqued driving past, that smell would have drawn me in. I walked up the paved stone path to the front stoop where I saw the scattered stones I had first noticed Tuesday. Kneeling down to take a closer look, I saw they weren't just random rocks. They were pieces of a single, larger stone that had fallen and shattered on the ground. Gently, I picked up several pieces, turning them over in my hand and feeling a warmth radiating from each, probably because they'd been sitting in the sun all day. Every piece had a patchwork of lines lightly chiseled into one side, and I tried to arrange them back into their original configuration. When I was finished, or at least as finished as I could be given how severely some of the pieces had been pulverized by the fall, I could see it was indeed writing. I remember reading somewhere that you can't read in dreams, so I'm assuming that's why the symbols on the stone looked like straight lines, intersecting at odd angles to form nonsense arrangements. It's harder to explain what happened next. Through all of this, the sweet smell emanating from within the house grew stronger and stronger, filling my nostrils and completely intoxicating me. All I wanted to do was find where it was coming from, and, well, after that, I didn't know. It had to be coming from inside. Of that much, I was certain, and I opened the screen door to enter, swinging it open noiselessly on well-oiled hinges. There was a woman's voice speaking words I can't recall. Then the dream ended, and I woke up back here on the couch. There was a moment of disorientation as the sun had been starting to set when I got out of the shower, but when I woke, it looked like morning. Checking the living room clock, I was shocked to see it was 9 a.m. I'd been sleeping on the couch for more than 12 hours, something I hadn't done since college. It hadn't been a particularly restful sleep either, because I was exhausted and spent most of Saturday in my actual bed, nodding in and out of sleep. This time, I didn't dream. Today, I think I'm actually going to go over to check out the Blue House for real. When I get back, I'll let you know what I found.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.